Hello, Amy. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Ed. How are you doing?
All right, I'm Ed Parcaut. And then I'm with Amy Tietmeyer. We are the hosts of Helping the Brave. And before I get into today's guest, did you have anything to say? Anything coming up?
We have the Manion Wad on Saturday, so that's pretty
What?
cool. Manion Wad, which is workout of the day for Travis Manion,
Okay.
because
Oh, that's
April
right. You work for
29th is the day
Travis
he died.
Mannion, don't you? Foundation. So, all right, gotcha. And where's the money? Is it like a donations for it?
So you can sign up online, and it does take donations. It's one of the things that funds all the good work that we do within the community. But it's a workout, but it's super simple to do. It's just 29 back squats, 400-meter run. You do it 7 times.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. All right. Well, we'll get Ron up there. All right. All right. Today's guest, I met him through Steve Sims. He reached out to me saying, "Hey, you need to connect with this guy. He's helping vets." He didn't know much about it because you know how Steve does. He just connects you and gets out of the picture. And so I got to talk to him about a week or so ago, and I wanted to get him on the show, but we were booked out till you know almost into June now. And so we luckily had somebody who said they had something else to do. And we got him in right away. So let's bring Ron into the show. Hey, Ron, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. You probably don't know much about Helping the Brave, but basically we've been doing this for a couple of years. And what we do is we have people come on and talk about their transition, talk about what happened in their life, and move and help vets get through things. And you've had a unique situation, so I thought you'd be great to come on and talk about it. And I want people to understand what you do. So first of all, I know you're a Marine. Why did you choose the Marines?
Kind of didn't have a choice there. As a child, at the age of 6, I left living with my primary caregiver, my parents, and I went to live with my grandparents. And I was a little unruly at the age of 6, resulting from the transition. And at some point, my grandfather didn't put me in military schools, but he asked me if I wanted to go and if I would go check it out. And I was all excited, so I did. And that school was an experimental school. It's now called Young Marines. It's almost like Big Brothers. It was something different back then. And anyway, that school is basically, it's like devil pups, and you go through all sorts of training at a young age, learn military bearing and so on and so forth. So it was kind of preordained from an early age that I go to the Marine Corps from the age of 6, junior high, high school, college, so on and so forth. The formality of boot camp was 1987, October 1987, graduated boot camp Christmas, and officially became a Marine, and off I went.
Now, and this is a layman's statement, is all Marines devil dogs?
Yes. Devil dogs, ground pounders, there's several different names. Leathernecks, because everything has a historical value.
Well, Leathernecks definitely would be John Wayne movie.
But there's always something historical about it. So back in the day, Leathernecks, because they wore a leather collar around their neck to protect from the sabers. We're talking hundreds of years ago.
Amy's going, in the 80s they had that?
Yeah, whatever. My dad is a Marine. I know Marine folklore.
There you go. There's a lot of it. I mean, everything on the uniform means something. The 7 belt loops for the 7 C's, the blood stripe, everything about a Marine's uniform has significant value to it as far as the history.
God, I wish our Navy uniform did.
Go Uber.
Like, who picked the damn dungarees? God damn it.
I always wondered about the white Navy uniform and how you can see the boxers through the uniform. It's like, what? They're very sheer.
Yeah, well, you're not. That's why they don't issue you boxers unless they're white.
Okay.
Yeah, you're supposed to wear white anyway. So, but dude, once I got out of the boot camp and corps school, we wore scrubs, so it didn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. Amy, got any questions there for this devil dog before we get moving?
No. Did you do any? So how long did you stay in the Marines?
10 years total. Active duty 1987 to 1992. Got out for about a week, went back in the reserves, and then went active again. So 10 years.
All right, so that you pretty much covered what most of the questions we asked, like why'd you join the service, and what have you done? I want people to understand, because the whole story is going to take a little bit longer today, and I want people to understand everything you do. So why don't you tell your story of what happened, and then where you went on vacation for a while, and what you do now.
So, I mean, I had a good military career. Yes.
While you're doing it, I'll probably interrupt you through the process, so don't be upset.
Yeah, outstanding. No problem at all. So during that time in the Marine Corps, it was a normal Marine Corps career. Saw some combat, saw some action, saw some people die, got involved in some things. Didn't process a lot of things that I was involved in back then. Back when I was in the Marine Corps in the early days, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine Raiders was the pre-organization for what became MARSOC, Marine Corps Special Operations. Force Recon changed. I don't even think it's Force Recon anymore. The Raiders, all kinds of stuff. But when I was in, it was a lot of experimental stuff going on. We were just experimenting with how to mount 50 cals and Mark 19s on Boston Whalers without cracking the hull, because we kept cracking the hull. So it was good times. It was good times. I was younger. Long story short, came back after 1994, had a lot of injuries. I was getting med boarded out. I was in the process of med boarding out when I committed a crime that sent me to prison for 32 years to life. That was the sentence I got. That crime was attempted murder, and I am guilty of shooting at somebody and shot somebody. I was not trying to kill them. I was trying to stop them from being killed, and my solution at the time to do that was to shoot them myself. In the military world, things like that might be normal, downrange in combat. Can't be doing stuff like that stateside. In my mind, I was doing a good thing. How I did it was completely inappropriate. And I want to be very clear, I'm not blaming any of the decisions that I made on my time in the Marine Corps or the military in general at all. There was things that I experienced in the military, but frankly, the unaddressed things from my childhood are what affected me in my decision-making process, not the military. I made some poor choices on how to stop Dr. Shoemaker from being killed, how I did that. And rightfully so. I was later convicted for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and shooting a gun on a freeway. I was sentenced to 32 to life, September 1997. And that's when my other career started in the California prison system.
Before we get into your other career, Amy, have any questions yet? Because I have a couple.
Well, no, not yet. I have a lot of questions that are, pondering for the future, but I want to get further into the story.
Well, my question is, all right, so when you most of us have trauma from our childhood. That's why we joined the service and do combat or go that way. And you said that's what affected your decisions. Did you have, just two questions, did you have PTSD from what you saw over there, or did you have it just from your childhood? Or did you even have it?
Both.
Like three questions.
And I'm going to say, yeah, definitely PTSD from the childhood. From the military. And no, it's not both. I wouldn't say it's both at all. I would say I had an experience as a 6-year-old child. And I can share with you what that is. It's the age of 6 years old. My dad kneeled down, put his hands on my shoulders. And my dad is 6'6", so he was a tall guy. And I was a 6-year-old little kid. He kneeled down, put his hands on my shoulder, and he said, "You're the reason your mother and I are getting divorced. You were a mistake. You shouldn't have been born. And that's why I'm leaving." And he left, went off to Vietnam. I never saw him again. Those 4 words, "You were a mistake," that was my childhood trauma. I didn't know what to do with that. I don't think any 6-year-old boy or child knows what to do when your hero, your father, tells you you're a mistake. Now, as you can imagine, I was acting out because of that. And my mom was having her own issues post-hysterectomy. She was having all kind of hormonal imbalances. And I was quite the handful. And so they felt I needed more structure in my life. So they sent me to my grandparents. My mom did. And he also felt that I needed more structure, having a military background himself. And he knew about this I want to call it an experimental program where they're training kids that are orphaned and don't have families, trying to get them on the right path.
Did anybody know that your dad said that to you?
No.
Besides you?
No. Yeah. And it's interesting, Ed, that's the first time in my life anybody's asked me that question.
Well,
And
I had a shitty dad, so I understand.
what I come to find out from the program that I created was that I'm not the Lone Ranger. So many people have been told, so I wish the rubber wouldn't have broke. I mean, I've heard so many stories over the years from the therapy groups we do. And it's like, wow, okay. But what I learned, one, was it took being locked up for me to look in the metaphorical mirror and identify, okay, why am I making the choices I'm making? Why am I doing things as self-destructive as I am? Like, there's better ways to stop somebody from getting killed than shooting them on the freeway or shooting their car. Much better ways to stop it than what I did. My thought was, if I made it so public, the person that wanted it done couldn't ask someone else to do it because it would be too public. And it was very public. I achieved that. But it cost me, rightfully so.
Wow.
So how long were you incarcerated? Because you're obviously not incarcerated now, right?
23 years. From 1997, the end of 1997 to October 2017. 2012. So for the first decade or so of my time in prison, I had a lot of internal rage about the fact that I put myself there. In a way, at that point in time, it was a type of societal suicide. I wasn't up to killing myself, but I removed myself from society. But how I did it, after I started attending a lot of different self-help groups inside prison, just because it's better than sitting in the cell all day, little things started creeping in my mind, and I started taking these programs more serious, and I started studying even more in the field of psychology and sociology. And I came to the conclusion, and this is not the conclusion you want to come to from self-help groups, but the conclusion I came to was that I had completely dishonored my friends, the Marine Corps, which was my family, the people that died in the Marine Corps. And I just came to the conclusion one day that I didn't deserve to be here anymore. So I braided a rope and I hung myself. I soaked it in water. I did a TED Talk about it. And the rope broke, and I didn't make two ropes, and I really didn't know what to do about that because I've never had a rope break before. We used to make, we towed vehicles with these things, tear sheets, braid them, soak them in water. They're like impossible to tear. But this one broke. And when I was sitting there on my knees in the cell with the rope around my neck, I took it off and I just added a few thoughts. And as I said in the TED Talk, I felt two things initially: shame for having attempted and shame for having failed. And I came across that cat suicide study that Judge Reinhardt wrote in the Ninth Circuit Court. And I had this thought that, I can do better than this. Let me back up there. When I first came to prison in 1997, back then a CC1 counselor who went on to become the director of corrections, Ralph Diaz, he called me in his office and he said, he was looking at my file and he closed it. He slid it to the side. He said, "Ron, you've had a very impressive military record up to now. You're better than this. You can do better than this. I expect better than this of you. Have a good day." He didn't say inmate self, which that's the language in prison. All guards refer to you as inmate. It's a derogatory term. It's meant to put you in your place. But he didn't do that. He said, "Ron, have a seat." And I just remember that when the rope broke and I woke up, I remembered what he said: "You can do better than this." And I decided to take what education I already had and the education I'd been gaining already from the years of being in prison and going to college. I decided to create a program aimed at helping me and the people like me that made poor choices like me and that might have been influenced like me as a child by something that happened in their childhood. And so I did the first semester in the English 204 class on PTSD, second semester moral injury, third semester narration therapy, and I just kept going with it. I don't know how many semesters I did, but each one, it was great because the professors from Berkeley are the ones that came in to teach the classes. So my research assistants were from those schools. So the academic databases they were pulling from on the topics I needed, when I did a research request on something, they would come back with 3,000 pages. Okay, here's the research. And you're in prison. What else do you have to do? Go in your cell, read all the research, determine what's going to work for the program, compile a program. I did just that, created a program. It's funny too, because at the end of the last class, I submitted the proposal for the program and the teacher gave me an F. She said, this is nonsense. I sent it off to the American Psychiatric Association, and they said, this is a good idea. This is a good program. You should do a pilot program. I asked the people at San Quentin prison if I could. They said yes. The medical side of CDCR at the time said, no, absolutely not. You're an inmate. You're not doing anything clinical. That's our job. And I said, okay, if I make it educational, psychoeducation, can I do it then? They said, yeah, if you're talking about when PTSD got its formal recognition in 1980, largely due to the advocacy efforts of Vietnam Veterans of America, mental health professionals, and the DSM, blah, blah, blah. If I put that kind of stuff in there, now it's educational. So that's how I got past them. We did our first pilot program, and within a year, every veteran that was at San Quentin prison at that time that was seeing a therapist quit going to the therapist and was only coming to our group because they said they got more help from our group than they did from the therapists. That got headquarters attention, and they decided they wanted to work with us. They wanted to replicate the program, and it became the first program in the history of the prison system that a prisoner created that received funding for replication while the prisoner was still inside. So we went from San Quentin to Dual Vocational Institute. That was our second prison. And yeah, here we are today.
How many prisons are you in?
We're in 5 prisons, but we started the first veteran hub in the nation. And the reason I did that is because there's 32 prisons in the state of California with 6,900 veterans scattered amongst the population of 80,000 people. It's next to impossible, if not impossible, to get compensation examiners all over those 32 prisons. As hard and as much as they try to, the coordination was next to impossible. So I proposed to CDCR and the governor that they create a hub program, a southern, a central, and a northern hub where they divide the 6,900 veterans up into those 3 locations, have the VA on site 5 days a week doing the service compensation exams for the residents and staff and people in the community that are right there. They agreed to it. Governor wrote it into law and gave me a large amount of money to do a pilot program. I then hired Boston University to capture the science, Dr. Brett Leitz, who's going to be conducting the study on this, catching the qualitative and quantitative data, proving the efficacy of the program. And so Soledad Prison became the first veterans hub in the nation. And we're doing that now. We've been up and running for about 2 years now.
That's really, so I want to go back a little bit on with a question, like thinking of all the research that you've done and all the projects that you've been a part of. Do you think, like, if you walked and met a kid that resembled you way back before, do you think, do you have anything that you could say or any questions that you could ask that would pierce the veil of understanding for them and possibly get them from having to go through making all those bad decisions?
I think, Ed, you hit it. I'm going to answer your question by talking about something that Ed mentioned before, and that's about people having trauma before they join the military. I think that's true. A lot of people are in the military as a result to escape traumas in their life and circumstances, socioeconomic backgrounds, family dynamics, so much more. Having said that, I think is what is really important is that before people leave the military, there's a program in place, a resocialization program in place that incorporates working out and identifying what those significant events and traumas were as a child and what got compiled on top, or what came to be combined with that from military service. So the key, I think, is getting to them before they separate from the military. If you try to screen out all these problems before they even begin military service, you're not going to have anybody in the military.
Yeah, but the problem with, what the problem I see about, because you were talking about in your TED Talk and other stuff, is the boot camp out, right? You have a boot camp in, you should have a boot camp out. The biggest problem you're going to have is you're going to have people who won't open up because they think that they shouldn't open up about those things.
Well, and that's
how do you get past that?
You have people like me that are leaders in the community, people that have walked that walk, people that have sat in the foxholes and dug holes and done everything that those guys have done. And I have to be willing to open up and share and be vulnerable. And what I found is when I model the program, when I read a writing prompt about my childhood and that time when Dad told me I was a mistake, I'm setting the tone for all the people. And if I allow myself to be vulnerable, it allows them to be vulnerable. Every time that's been the experience. There really is strength and vulnerability. And you have to model that, though. And I'll give you an example. And this has happened in almost every group since 2012. There's always one or two people in the group that were molested or raped by family members, men, in the program. And when one of those men share that in a group in prison where the machismo factor is off the roof anyway, I used to think I knew what courage was. I thought I had that locked down from being in combat and experiencing things. I knew I had that locked down. But after sitting in a group year and year after year, listening to guys share those types of experience, I realized I knew nothing of courage, and that what they were doing was truly courageous. Because I don't know that I could do that. Share in a circle of 18 men in prison that my uncles raped me, sustained for years. Guys share that. And when one guy shares that, it's literal domino effect. All of a sudden, other people in the group that had like experiences are sharing them. And to the man and woman, everyone that does that, they literally say they walk away lighter. They feel they've left some baggage at the curbside, so to speak. Now, you'll never get rid of that, but you can distance yourself from that event in such a way that it doesn't have the effect on you that it used to have. The triggers aren't so intense, if at all, when you address it head on. One of the flaws I find in Western psychology is, it's in the past, let it be in the past. No, you have to address the past. The past reflects how you're going to be in the future. And that's what we do in this program. So again, it's a long answer, Ed, sorry. It's peer-to-peer programming, and it's people stepping up and allowing themselves to be vulnerable with very hard experiences that allow other people to be vulnerable.
Okay, so I do disagree that if we, I didn't have trauma growing up from my growing up. Like Ed would say.
We never said everybody. We
Okay.
said most people.
So
A large percentage that run into combat have it.
However, but I have
She was
PTSD and went through things in the military. And so I am a part of a group that we do peer-to-peer counseling, and I agree 100%. Like, it is so much more effective. It is so much more beautiful to have that peer-to-peer connection than it is with traditional talk therapy, at least for me. These have been, my experiences in working with my friends who work a lot of times for veteran service organizations, who are the ones that are mentors within the community for me and different things like that. So I love when I know that they're doing a peer-to-peer group for whatever designation they identify with.
Right. You said you disagreed about something, though. What was that?
Well, just that if we healed our people before going into the military, they wouldn't go into the military. I feel like there still would be a ton of people going into the military.
Yeah, there would be a lot of people going for the GI Bill and other different reasons. But I found a greater majority of people are seeking something.
Well, possibly. But, I mean, you can still seek something. I just, I believe in the world. Like, I believe that we can get better. I believe
absolutely.
Our communities can develop and grow. I feel like we've gotten as a nation so polarized, but I do think if we do the work, if we do the hard work, we can make huge strides.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things that I live by and that I truly believe is I think every human being is redeemable. It's a stretch for some people that actually have some neurological problems that they're just never going to be right. But even I feel that's something that should be taken into consideration. And if they can't be in society, they shouldn't necessarily be treated like animals because there's something neurologically wrong with them that they have no control over that causes them to act out in a certain way. I think less punitive is the way to go and more with understanding.
And I agree with that because I love working with kids that a lot of people consider trash or whatever. And I think they're incredible people. And I love working with a lot of the kids.
You just hit on something that's huge. I agree with that. A lot of kids, like myself, are acting out as more often than not as a result of something they experienced that they don't understand. And a lot of times they're reacting to it. a week after my dad told me I was a mistake, I was out in the front yard and I picked up a brick and I threw it through the pane window in the front room. I mean, it was like an 8-foot window. It was, boy, did I get in trouble. But I mean, what was going on with me, right? I didn't understand. I just knew that my hero was gone and I was a mistake. I didn't know what any of that meant, just that he was gone and it was my fault. So of course I was acting out.
Well, and I think it's interesting. Like, geez, a lot of the kids that I've worked with through the years are, like I said, incredible people, and I've never walked into a situation with kids where I've feared for myself. And people talk about, oh my God, I can't believe you work there. Are you scared about your car or your whatever? No, I'm self-aware. I pay attention to my environment, and if I feel nervous, I have somebody escort me to my car. But for the most part, the kids I work with, fantabulous.
Yeah, but I think what you have to do is find out why they're acting out. What is the core issue? And that's why I asked you, did anybody ever ask you, anything? Not that you would tell them, this is what my dad said, this is why I'm doing it, but you have to get to the core issue of what's going on. And I think a lot of us, don't know how to express that.
Or even know, one of the big things is insight. That word insight, it's like a 4-letter word in prison, because the parole board is always asking you, well, what's the insight, and why did you think it was okay to do what you did? You lack insight. They're like, no, I have insight. I know what I did. I shot somebody. No, that's what you did, but why did you do it? What is the nexus? What happened in your life that you thought it was okay to take that gun and shoot somebody? So let's talk about that for a second. So for me, my dad told me I was a mistake. Okay, so moving forward 30, 40 years, what I realized after really looking at myself and doing a lot of introspection, what that developed in me at a subconscious level, as I was always looking for a surrogate father figure who, if I worked hard enough, I would not be a mistake. Now, this was all going in my mind at a subconscious level. But as you can imagine, in military schools and in the military itself, there's no shortage of authority figures that are high-ranking father-type figures. So, I mean, I was in no way, shape, or form any braver or heroic than anyone else that I served with, but I had something driving me none of them did, or that I was aware of. And for whatever reason, people often followed me. In no way, shape, or form would I ever call myself a hero, but I absolutely had the pleasure of serving with many people that were heroes.
Can we go? I want to go to your program. If that's all right. Yeah. You okay there, Amy?
I am. You
All
just
right, you're good. What?
no. It was just you had anyhow. Go for it.
Oh no, I totally, thanks for being so vulnerable today, Ron. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But all right, so your program's in California. Are you going to go across the country with it? Go to
We're in California. We've been in Sterling. We're in Colorado also. We've been in Sterling Correctional for 2.5, almost 3 years. We have 6 groups going there. I just came back from Texas. We're going to expand it to Texas and Arizona. But I really have to slow down a little bit because a lot of things happen with exponential growth. The program loses its potency. You start to lose control of things. And actually, that kind of happened here a little bit. I started getting so busy that I just wasn't spending a lot of time at the Veterans Hub here that I created, and it started to affect how things ran. And that's on me. I own that. So I've had to make some changes more recently in the last week where I've had to dial back, or I needed to dial back some of the things I'm doing externally and put a little more focus on what I originally created and make sure that it stays as it was supposed to stay.
How do you do that moving forward in other areas? You know what I mean?
It means that I don't get weekends off anymore. That's what that means. And I'm okay with that. To me, what is important, and it's something, for me, the program that I created wouldn't be a success if the people participating in it didn't take it seriously. If the staff that I have working with me didn't believe in the program and didn't put their hearts and souls into it, we couldn't do what we do. And we're literally saving lives. We are. And I was spreading myself too thin and not giving the program here the quality attention that it needed from the person that founded it, that had the experience. And so I just made a real commitment to change a few things and be more present for the staff and the guys inside that need me to be present.
how do you fix that for the other hubs?
Well, for the other hubs, we'll have directors at the other hubs. We're in a place now, thanks to the governor and the funds they gave us, to where we can actually pay people a good income. So we have a small staff, but I'm able to pay them livable wages, to where we'll have a director of each hub. And it's much more workable when you have 3 hubs or 3 locations that you can travel to, as opposed to going to 32 different prisons. It's just not doable. We just can't. I mean, as it is, just going to 5 different prisons is a stretch on my staff and myself. And we want to replicate this in an appropriate manner so that it's a success. I started working and trying to work on a broader scale with the federal government, because it's actually easier to implement a hub system at the federal level than at the state level, because each state is so vastly different. But the federal prison system, they're the entire United States. So I'm proposing to them they create a West Coast hub, an East Coast hub, and a Central United States hub. They put their 11 to 14,000 veterans in those hub locations, just like what I did here. And it's just much easier because they literally are the entire United States. I'm still climbing up that tree.
So basically what we're saying is we have state level prisons and we have federal prisons.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
As you can tell, I got lucky.
And we do. And it's a lot of work. There's just under 200,000, I think, veterans incarcerated in the United States, both federally and state. We don't have a very accurate current census on that. 5-6 years ago, it was 160, 180,000, and it's gone up since then. So we're guessing it's around 200.
Now, to stop that from happening, do you think the boot camp out would fix that?
I truly believe, and I've heard from so many of the veterans in the program, they reported if they had gone through a program like this prior to separating, they wouldn't be where they are now. And I don't believe that's lip service. I think that's factual. Had they processed many of the things that they're processing now, many of them wouldn't have made the choices they've made.
So let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought of creating a program that, like you have in military prisons?
Yes, absolutely have. And it's bandwidth.
Okay.
It comes down to bandwidth. I also created a program called Veterans of the Streets for gangbangers, people who grew up in urban environments. And it's based on the same curriculum, because people that grew up on the streets in gangs often didn't have primary caregivers, the parents. It was the gang that was the influence. They suffer from collateral damage. They suffer from survivor's guilt. They suffer PTSD. They have the same experiences. I would not have believed that had I not gone to prison and worked side by side with these individuals. In fact, I had a guy one day when I was in education at San Quentin. He walked by and he said, "Hey, Ron, can I get in your group?" I'm like, "Yeah, what branch of the service are you in?" He said, "I'm a veteran of the street, homeboy. I'm a Compton Crip." And he laughed, and I laughed, and he went to class. And then I started thinking about that, and then we started talking. And I wouldn't call it a biosocial intake on him that I did, but I interviewed him, and I asked him about a lot of pertinent questions about his life. Come to find out, the information I came away with, this guy, he's just like a veteran from combat, only he grew up in urban streets doing his thing. And the California Endowment for 10 years was trying to find a reputable veteran program to acknowledge that people that grew up in urban environments had the same type of PTSD as combat veterans. And to the organization, over 10 years, they were told, "Don't you dare compare our veterans to gang-banging thugs." Then they came to San Quentin prison to visit the college program. And Jody Lewin, the director of the college program, said, "You should go talk to this guy, Ron Self, about this program he created." And they asked me that question. And I said, "I absolutely agree, 100%. Those guys have the same type of PTSD. Had I not come to prison, I would not have been exposed to that reality. And I would have been one of those guys saying, 'Don't you dare compare me to gangbangers.'" Going to prison, in many ways, enlightened me and allowed me to grow in ways I never could have or would have. It allowed me to see a side of reality of society that most don't see. Most people just believe, as I did, if someone's in prison, they deserve to be there. They don't look at the totality of the situation that brought someone to make a choice to be there. And often people may not like to admit it, but it's a societal problem. And if you're not old enough or mature enough to have kids, then you damn sure shouldn't be having kids. if you're a child yourself. That's
Right.
just how I feel.
And that's why you're on here, to tell how you feel. But all right, so this is going to be a stupid question, but looking back, would you want to change anything?
Wow. There were many times since I went to prison, and even now, that I wish I would have died downrange somewhere. The Marine Corps became my family, and I let them down. How I did what I did, I could have done that better. So for me, my mission, and it almost sounds like a soundbite, and it's not, but at one point in time, we were all entrusted to carry a weapon in defense of this country. And that's a lot of trust. And what I did, I violated that trust. And I don't know if I can ever gain that level of trust back, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying. And I'm okay if I never get there, but my mission is to help other people not make the poor choices I made. So it's a hard question to answer. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't wish it on you to change, because of you, you're changing a lot of lives. And as much as you see the pain when you, I think what you did is exactly where you need to be. And I'm sorry that I'm saying that to you, but that's what I see. Everything I heard from you today, and I feel from what I can feel. I know I'm on a camera, but I can feel the pain. I can feel what you do for people through your face, your emotions, everything about you. That I think you are exactly where you should be.
It's been hard. I thank you for that. I still continue to stumble. I need to figure out a better way to interact with my staff, because the civilian world complexes me sometimes.
That, you know how you do that? You get an interpreter to work between the two of you. That's how you do that. Because I still have that fucking problem in my staff. All right.
I'm abrasive. I don't give enough information. I don't share enough information.
Sounds like you're a veteran. Ron, that's just how we are. You can't change certain things. So how you fix that is you get somebody in between you to make that communication for you.
Yeah, I'm
I
working on it.
agree. Remember,
Huh?
before you got on, Ed, we were talking about utilizing somebody who has the opposite character strengths.
Yeah.
So I would say this. I would 100% agree with Ed on both things. I think you are so valuable now, and our journeys, regardless of how painful, they impact. Yours has impacted so many people. So I am very thankful that you're here doing what you do. But I think there could be a person who could absolutely help you with the softer skills.
Somebody that works with your staff, and you work with the people you do best by.
My husband's the sensitive one. I'm not. So
Who's the sensitive one? Oh, your husband. That's right.
Yeah.
But I also see people like you, helping vets getting out. One of you at each time that these people get together before they get out for this boot camp out. I see that that's needed drastically, especially for combat, especially for people in infantry, because a lot of the people have this problem. It's the job they pick. That's why they pick that job. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And my son's an airborne medic. He's freaking snowboarder. That's why he picked parachuting, right? Because he's freaking crazy. He when he played sports, he had no concern for his body when there was a ball in play, right? And so that's what all the coaches said, man. When there's a ball in play, he has no concern for his body and what happens to him. It's so true. And it's the same thing when he snowboards and everything else. That's why. And then finally, he just said there that, I think I'm going to stop jumping. I'm going to let my airborne go because it's just really tough on him. I'm like, he's 21. He just turned 22, so.
Wow. That's insightful at that age.
Yeah. Well, he hit a tree pretty hard.
That'll do it.
A long time ago. Yeah. So, yeah, the wind blew them all off course, and a lot of them hit trees. He hit it pretty hard. Luckily, they wear helmets. So.
That's a hard lesson. That's a good lesson at that age, though. I mean.
But again, back to you. I think you are where you need to be because you're there to help vets. I know it was a tough life and to get you where you are, but I see a lot of need for you to be where you're at and for you to help eventually get this boot camp out for the military. Because I think it's important. I think we need it more than people know we need it, especially for junior enlisted. We don't need it so much for officers and NCOs that have been in for a while, retiring, all this stuff. Really for the young people who are getting out 4 years, 3 years, with that tour part.
No, it's true. And that's a big discussion about the program. Well, who goes through the program, who should, who shouldn't go through it. And initially I was thinking, well, everybody should go through it, but not everybody needs to go through it. The 3-star general is leaving the military, walking into a $500,000 a year job that's part-time. He's just fine. He's not having the issues. Well, I don't want to say everyone. That may not be the case for everyone. I actually have met some high-ranking officials that have issues. They don't command the respect they used to in the civilian world. People aren't snapping and saluting every time they see them. People aren't opening doors for them. It's like, hey, don't you know who I am? I'm a 4-star general. Nobody cares. But that's a different story. Not all of them like that. But yeah.
All right. Before we go, what does your program need from anybody listening? Is there anything that we can help you with? How do people need? What do you need?
I think the biggest thing is to run these individual programs. Each VHV group consists of roughly 12 to 14 participants in the prison, and then we have 2 outside facilitators. It's finding people that are willing to volunteer 2 hours of their time a week for up to a year to come in and help facilitate these programs and to go in and talk and spend time with these veterans. Obviously, funding is a big thing. Trying to do the real work and chase down the dollars to be able to buy the curriculum and pay the staff. We've been fortunate, but we have to keep knocking on doors because we have to keep the revenue coming in. So I keep paying the staff to go in and do this. So it's always revenue and volunteers. And I don't know. I'm not a big politician per se, but I think the constituency does have the ability to get to their congressmen and their senators and say, hey, let's really push the change. So I was asked to be a commissioner on the Council of Criminal Justice that created the Veterans Justice Commission. Leon Panetta's on that, Chuck Hagel, General Corelli, General Mack, 4 or 5 other generals, Colonel Seward, who is the chair of it. He's still active duty. And then myself and a couple of other, Carla Bug, who's a formerly incarcerated veteran. She's on there. And one of the ideas is to arrive at a place how we can better help the military implement a system, like not necessarily boot camp out, right? They're not there yet, but they are doing some pretty extensive studies, and they've assembled a pretty heavy hitter panel of guys to come up with solutions to how better to address the needs of military people before they exit the military and either commit suicide or go to prison. And one thing I really commend Leon Panetta for saying, he said he's been a part of more commissions than you can even imagine. This is probably going to be one of his last, and he doesn't want to be a part of something that's just going to produce another report that's going to sit on a shelf. This is about changing policy. And Chuck Hagel and Colonel Seward and Mr. Panetta, they've all been to Washington several times. I've been there several times. They've flown us out there. We've gotten together, and we've been doing some serious think tank stuff on how to address this. I'm there because of what I created in the prison system now, and it's becoming a proven practice. So that's how I got a seat at the table. And I'm just going to keep banging that drum until some of the people listen or tell me to kick rocks.
All right. Well, you got to keep us posted. Anything you need, you let us know. I'm in for whatever you need. We'll talk afterwards. But
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Ron, thank you so much for being on the show and being vulnerable and telling your story. Really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. And to anyone out there listening, again, this isn't about me. It's about what we can collectively do to help our fellow service members, both active duty, both those that are in the community now, those that are in prison, and those that are homeless on the streets. Less than 1% of Americans have served in the military. That's not a lot of people if you think about how many people are in America. People are always talking about how they support the troops, and well, I say prove it. You see a veteran, help them out, ask them how they're doing. And often the ones that look like they're okay, all their parts are there and they seem to be okay, those are usually the ones that aren't okay. So yeah, just try and be a friend.
And we're big on reaching out to 22 people a week. You know, not everybody knows 22 veterans, but you can reach out to 22 people a week, see how they're doing, make sure they're okay.
Absolutely.
That's the easiest way to stop somebody, is just to let them know that people care about them.
Absolutely. Just saying hello to somebody. Like, you know, a lot of people will ignore the homeless. They don't want to make eye contact, right? Because they think something can happen. But if you make that eye contact and you just say hello, I've seen guys, just a smile comes when you've seen them for 2 weeks sitting there and never smiling, and you stop and say, "I just want to say hi. How are you doing? I don't have anything, but I just want to say hi." Makes a difference.
Ron, thanks again for being on the show today. We really appreciate it. Amy, thank you for being here also. And Ed, thanks for being here. Hey, no problem. Appreciate it. All right, I want to thank everybody for watching. If you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure you subscribe and share it out and let everybody know about it. And again, leave us a couple of reviews on it, Spotify and Apple. And again, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.